Israel's nuclear weapons are an open secret, but could they be deployed? As the war on Iran grinds on, the best conventional weapons are being used. But with the regime in Tehran holding firm, could nuclear be an option? And if the conflict ends, would Iran have grounds to build its own nuclear arsenal? I'm Andrea Sankey, and this is the Newsmakers. Well, part of the so-called justification for the U.S. and Israel declaring war on Iran was the threat of its nuclear program, the same one President Trump said was obliterated during the 12-day war in June. For years, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said Iran is either days, weeks, or months away from getting a nuclear bomb, a prediction that never came true. Meanwhile, Israel's nuclear program has long been known to hold dozens of nuclear arms. While Israel has never confirmed that, it's never denied it either. And it's led to repeated accusations of international double standards. Here's a look back at the history of Israel's nuclear weapons program.
Israel's nuclear program dates back to the early years of the Israeli state. In the 1950s, under Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, Israel began pursuing a nuclear capability as a strategic deterrent in a volatile region. With assistance from France, the country built the Dimona nuclear facility in the Negev desert, which analysts say became the center of its nuclear development. By the late 1960s, Israel is widely believed to have developed the capability to produce nuclear weapons. Yet the country has never officially confirmed possessing them.
They have 90-plus warheads. I wouldn't be surprised if their number of warheads were up in the hundreds. Most people think they've produced enough plutonium, they've enriched, reprocessed enough plutonium for somewhere between 100 and 200 warheads. But most people give them 90 warheads, 90-plus warheads.
The knowledge of Israel's nuclear weapons comes from a single whistleblower. In 1986, a former technician at the Negev Nuclear Research Facility, Mordecai Vanunu, revealed details of Israel's nuclear program to Britain's Sunday Times newspaper. In response, Israel's intelligence agency Mossad lured him to Italy, then abducted him and secretly took him back to Israel. He spent 18 years in jail and remains to this day subject to heavy restrictions. And Israel maintains a policy of what is known as nuclear ambiguity, neither confirming nor denying the existence of its arsenal. It's one of the few countries that's not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, meaning its nuclear facilities are not subject to international inspections. Iran, meanwhile, is a signatory to the treaty, and its nuclear program has been monitored by the UN's nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Well, joining me now to look further at the role nuclear programs and weapons have played and could play in this conflict are from Tel Aviv, political analyst and contributor to Haaretz, Akiva Eldar. From London, associate fellow with the MENA program at Chatham House, Zizet Darkazali. And from New York, senior research fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, William Hartung. Thank you all so much for being with me. Akiva, I'll start with you in Tel Aviv and ask you to explain what purpose Israel's nuclear program has actually served up until now. Is Israel safer for having it?
It feels safer. Many Israelis ask themselves today, what would happen if Israel did not have what they say Israel has got? It's the opacity helps Israel to keep what it has in Dimona and call it textile industry. But at the same time, they believe that if Israel did not have the nuclear facility, Iran would have done what the leaders of Iran have been saying for years. Like Khamenei, who said that Israel is a cancer, is a tumor that we have to remove. The rhetorics of fundamentalists are taken seriously in Israel. And I think that the fact that Israel did not use it, including now when Israel says that it is under existential threat from Iran, proves that it's good to have it, but at the same time, many people like you are asking, how can Israel deal with double standards like this? That you say that you will not introduce, you will not be the first one to introduce nuclear weapons, but at the same time, you know, it's a common knowledge. When I write in the paper about nuclear, the Israeli nuclear power, nuclear weapons, I have to say to keep mentioning that this is in accordance to foreign, I can quote TRT, I can quote you, but I can say that Israel, admit that Israel has the nuclear weapons. But once Israel will get rid of the Iranian, let's say, what Iran has in the cellar, the 440 kilos of enriched uranium, then I think that Israel will lose its justification not to sign the NPT.
Okay.
So
well, let me
it's
ask.
going to be, yeah.
Yeah, let me ask Zizet about that, because critics often say that the international community treats Israel's nuclear capability differently, of course, than other countries. I mean, does it reflect some kind of double standard, or is Israel exempt because it did not sign on to the treaties, for example, that Iran has?
Well, thank you for having me on the program, Andrea. Good to be with you. Look, one can argue that the entire non-proliferation regime is based on hypocrisy, simply because it allows certain nations to possess nuclear weapons while others are denied from doing the same. Double standards start with the fact that powerful nations signed on the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, are asking other nations to dismantle their nuclear capabilities while they themselves are working on enhancing their modernizing and enhancing their nuclear capabilities. So yes, the West is silenced on Israel's nuclear capability, while putting pressure on other countries like Iran, like North Korea, is an example of double standards, and show that the approach to a nuclear weapon is guided by geopolitics and not by making the world safer from nuclear proliferation. I would also I would give an example that even when Iran complied with the agreement, with the JCPOA agreement that was signed in 2015, and worked with the U.S. to control its weapons, the Trump administration unilaterally withdrew from the agreement, and the Biden administration never restored it. But at the same time, as you said, there is the view that because Israel never acknowledged that it has nuclear weapons, unlike Iran, who signed the NPT, Israel never signed the NPT, that puts more scrutiny on Iran, and it can accuse Iran of violating the treaty. But just kind of just to be clear that this double standards weakens the entire global nuclear order, and shows that the whole idea of nuclear, the NPT as well, is to just balance powers and adhere to the interests of the superpowers, and not to dismantle the world from the danger of nuclear.
Okay, let me ask William about that then. I mean, is the ultimate detrimental consequence to all of this here that Israel having this nuclear program actually does, in a way, chip away at the legitimacy of international law and order that we all pay for in the end when international law is consistently dismissed by certain selective powers?
Yeah, it's a high price. I mean, Iran had agreed to cap and block its path to a nuclear weapon, not just with the United States, with European powers, the European Union, China, Russia. It's a deal that was working. Donald Trump said he could do better. And now we have the Mideast-wide war, which is certainly not better. As was referenced, the major powers under the NPT are supposed to be getting rid of their nuclear arsenals. Instead, they're modernizing them. So the unequal treatment of Israel is one thing, but also the major players are not living up to the spirit of the treaty.
And in that, William, do you fear that Iran will now have, if this conflict ends relatively soon, will now have justification to flaunt international law itself and begin building some kind of nuclear arsenal, even though it denied ever having the intention to?
Well, I think they may do it to defend against this kind of war that's happening now. I mean, Gaddafi gave up his nuclear weapons. He was overrun and killed. North Korea did not. They have not been invaded. I think the lesson is if you don't have some way, if you're overwhelmingly outmatched in conventional arms, countries that are willing to invade your country, kill your leaders, talk about disabling it almost as a functioning society, they may well go that route. But it'll be difficult to rebuild after the kind of destruction we've seen.
Yeah. Akiva, I mean, should Israelis fear that ultimate consequence, that international law and order really will no longer apply, and now the examples that have been set, for example, Gaddafi in Libya, could detrimentally affect Israeli civilians?
Well, the Israeli civilians have been used to turn a blind eye to the international law. Look what's happening in the occupied territories. And this brings me to the equation that Shimon Peres, who was the one who, according to foreign sources, who convinced France to sell Israel the plutonium and to build a nuclear facility, the Mona facility. What he said to me short time before he passed away, when I asked him how he wants to be remembered, he said, as a leader who made Israel strong enough so it can afford to make concessions, territorial concessions. But we are far away from that. And I believe that what Israel said, this is the Israeli official policy, that we will be willing to consider joining the non-proliferation treaty once there will be regional peace in the Middle East. Now, I want to remind the viewers that the Arabs, including the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, accepted the Saudi peace initiative that offers Israel normalization in return for, among other things, it was not mentioned that, but this was understood that there will be a regional agreement of non-proliferation. Now, the Israeli excuse is that Israel does not trust the NPT regime. Look at how the Iranians have been able to produce to enrich the uranium and to get the arsenal and hide it from the NPT inspectors. So perhaps I was thinking maybe we can, once there will be regional peace, to think about a kind of Latin America, kind of regional NPT that Israel can trust.
Okay. Zizette, could you envision something like that? And I mean, is there still, though, a fear that some kind of nuclear-guided Iran wanting to defend itself better in the wake of what's happened could lead to a wider nuclear race in the Middle East?
Look, I mean, a nuclear-free Middle East it will present a very significant step forwards, right, towards regional peace. It would also completely transform the security dynamics in the region towards the best. But a nuclear Iran could definitely shift the balance of power in the Middle East and trigger Israel and the US to see that, to restrict their military actions, and therefore, as a result, it would trigger race in nuclear weapon. But at the same time, it's important to note that with or without Iran, nuclear Iran, the Middle East is not a nuclear-free region. Israel has already started the nuclear race in the Middle East. A final point, I would just add that more broadly, and I think that was mentioned just earlier, that there is an international worldwide trend now to increase warheads, expand warheads, expand arsenals. And the Middle East is not isolated from that international trend. We've seen President Macron recently, just this month, saying that he's expanding the warheads of the arsenal of France. We've seen that the agreement between, the New START agreement between the US and Russia expired in February, which is also a dangerous development. So there's a worldwide risk as well for increasing the arms race, not only just looking at the Middle East as a particular risk in the region.
Okay, William, what do you see ultimately developing for the long term then? I mean, would it have to get, with the nuclear arms issue and the race to have them, have to get worse before it potentially gets better, regarding a scenario that Akiva was describing, like Latin America? Or, I mean, can it only really get worse, given what's transpired, especially over the course of this conflict?
Well, the Trump administration and the Netanyahu government have set back the possibility probably many years. There was an agreement that blocked Iran from getting a bomb. Israel should have supported it. And Israel is not setting conditions for peace in the region when they attack not only Iran, but Lebanon, which of course does not have nuclear weapons. So I think this is all very much in the wrong direction. And it's hard to imagine how one could trust the Trump administration in an agreement when they walked away from a perfectly good agreement and now are trying to, debilitate Iran as a functioning state. So that would have to change. And even then, the trust would have to be built. So it's an unfortunate and really shameful episode that's occurring right now.
And William, one could have argued that it would be expected that Israel deploys nuclear arms if facing an existential threat. And that's what Netanyahu has said repeatedly now, that Iran poses. So would there ever be a case then that nuclear weapons would be used if this regime stays intact as it has so far?
Well, Netanyahu's lying. There is no existential threat from Iran. And they didn't, even with a nuclear weapon, you have to mount it on a missile. And there would be deterrence. If they attacked Israel and threatened its existence, they would be destroyed in return. I think their main interest in a nuclear weapon is to prevent a conventional intervention of the kind that's occurring now. So if we accept Netanyahu's assumption, then of course they'll never get rid of nuclear weapons. But if we took a realistic view of the situation, then they should be gotten rid of.
Okay. Akiva, as an Israeli, I'll give you final words on that. I mean, has this policy of nuclear ambiguity actually served? Has it worked as a kind of that deterrent then you feel was the purpose that it served initially?
Well, I will remind you that there was a time when Israel felt that it is under existential threat. This was in '73 during the Yom Kippur War, when Israel was taken by surprise by both Egyptian and Syrian troops. And Moshe Dayan, who was at that time the Minister of Defense, was hysterical. And he asked Golda Meir if this is the time to arm the warheads of what is said Israel has in the basement. And she ruled it out. So I don't think that Israel will ever use nuclear weapons. As Israel says constantly, we will not be the first one to introduce it. And I would put Israel to the test. Once Iran will make a clear declaration that it is not planning to destroy Israel, Israel will lose its excuse to get this special treatment of opacity that you can have it, but you can deny it.
Okay, Akiva, that will have to be the final word for this segment of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with me. Now, let's turn to Iran and get a clearer picture of what is actually happening on the ground there now. And joining me from the capital director of the think tank Diplomatic House Iran, Hamid Reza Gholamzadeh. Thank you so much for being with me. If you don't mind, I mean, first, actually, we can start with you. I believe you heard the entire panel there talk about the nuclear threat or non-threat that Israel poses with its program. I'm wondering what your take on that is. Do Iranians feel threatened by Israel's possession of nuclear weapons?
It has always said that nuclear bombs create deterrence for the countries, and Iran is right now in fight against two of them. So it is fighting against the Israeli and the American regimes, and both of them possess nuclear bombs. And a while ago, we had some tension between India and Pakistan as well, both of them nuclear bomb holders. So I do believe that this is not working as a deterrent anymore. Maybe in areas in Europe, it might be a deterrent power, but for a country like Iran, it doesn't seem to be that. Especially when we consider the Islamic thoughts and mindset of the Iranian people. This morning, it was the Quds Day rally in the country. And at the same time that people were on the streets of Tehran, millions of people, there was an attack, and actually one or two civilians were martyred because of this attack against them. No one left the scene. Actually, they became more stronger when there was an attack, and at least one lady was martyred at the scene on the street among the population. So with this martyrdom culture in Iranian mindset, they are not at all concerned about a possible nuclear attack against the country. This is the spiritual aspect of that.
I was actually going to ask you about that, given the latest lines, and you're talking about the attack on the procession today, and how that is really affecting the psyche of the Iranian people. Many have said that there's the Iranian public now, whether they oppose the regime or support the regime, a common bond now of rallying against an enemy that has attacked innocent civilians. We spoke yesterday about cultural sites as well getting hit. Is that what you're seeing in light of as well today's attack on the festivities, if I can call them that, the Al-Quds, sorry, I shouldn't say festivities, but what we were seeing the gathering today in Tehran?
Iranians are getting united because of the foreign intervention, as you mentioned, and many of those who are protesting or against or opposing the establishment, they are concerned about the situation of economy, for example, or the situation of life. It's not about the whole establishment. They want some improvements or some reformation to the situation and their life situation in the life conditions. So they are not against the country, and they have realized that if there is any attack, if this establishment or this government is collapsed, then the country would be disintegrated. So that's why they are uniting around the same flag, and they are uniting against any enemies and any foreign intrusion.
Okay. Hamid Reza, let me
back to the first question, I would say, just shortly, that practically speaking about the nuclear bomb, considering the size of a country like Iran, even if the Israelis use a nuclear bomb against Iran, then there are many other cities and many areas that they can retaliate, and they can target the Mona, for example, nuclear facility, which act like a nuclear bomb, and they can actually carry out heavy strikes against the Israeli regime, and other countries would be involved, so that it would be an end to the Israelis themselves, so they cannot use nuclear bomb to prevent an existential threat against them. It would actually blow back as a, let's say, a final point for them, and then it would be their demise.
Okay, so you're saying Iranians do feel protected by the military and arsenal they have at their disposal.
Yes, I do.
It's also been said that really all Iran has to do to win this war is survive. All the destruction, rained on Iran by these massive military powers will not mean a U.S.-Israeli victory if the regime simply remains in power. So is Iran really just set for victory under that definition alone?
It's not something that Iran will accept, actually. It's the least that we can talk, because it means that the certain defeat of the Americans and Israelis, because they have clearly, overtly said that they are after regime change, and they have already failed to do that. They are hopeful that they can bring some people riots into the cities, and they can do something. It would fail, and boots on the ground is a myth that would not work. And the separatist groups failed already, even despite President Trump himself discussing that with the Kurdish groups in Iraq. And they have announced many objectives, and they have failed to achieve them. And they are just moving the goalposts. And they are, every other while President Trump is claiming something different from the previous claims. So they have already failed. This survival is a proof of the failure and defeat of the Americans and Israelis. But what Iran wants is more than that. Iran says that, as it was actually mentioned in the message by the new leader yesterday, that the military bases of the Americans in neighboring countries need to be evacuated and closed forever, because they are not helpful, and they are only creating a threat for Iran, for the security of region. And the security of region, as we have seen for the past 2 weeks, is connected to the global economy, and it would negatively impact the whole world.
Okay. Then, both of us coughing. Listen, if or when this attack ends, if it does end soon, and the regime remains more or less intact, as you're predicting, would Iran then choose to move forward with developing its nuclear program, potentially, as Israel and the US are going to suspect, a nuclear weapon as quickly as possible? Or is the nuclear program on hold, at least for the foreseeable future, because of the vulnerability it's given to Iran?
The activity is now on hold because of the attacks in last June, and they have not recovered everything yet. But about a development into a possible nuclear weapon, we know that the Americans and Israelis have assassinated the leader who had banned any nuclear weapon in any form, in having, keeping, or using. But now with a new leader and with new conditions that we are seeing apparently that there are clear threats against Iran, then there might be some jurisprudential and religious justifications for having a nuclear weapon. And that's something that the new leader needs to decide about, that, whether to adhere to the previous fatwa or have some new one. That depends on the situation in the future.
Okay. Hamdi Reza Gholamzadeh. We're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank you so much for being with us on the Newsmakers, and thank our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.